right, what's going on, you guys? Nick here with Nick Strength and Power. I wanted to make a video specifically about this topic that seems to be getting a lot of traction recently, and that is the posing routines that have been going viral for kind of the wrong reasons. There's been a lot of debate and discussion about what's appropriate for a bodybuilding finals posing routine, how much dancing is too much dancing, how much creativity during the routine is too creative, how much energy is too cringe. And it kind of started with the Flex Pro Weekend Italy. There's a pro bodybuilder named Michelle Pugliese that had a really interesting routine. There was a lot of dancing in the finals routine. There's no doubt about it. He did do some posing. There was a pretty gratuitous amount of dancing in the routine, but he did actually hit some poses during the finals routine. And this kind of started the conversation. There was another guy, a men's physique pro, Sean T. He was famous for like the workout DVD series. In men's physique, he kind of added some dancing into his posing routine, and that kind of furthered the conversation. And I think when it comes to the pros, I think it's a little bit more critiquable because the pros really represent the pinnacle of the sport and the professional aspect of what a finals posing routine should look like. And initially, I kind of had the same reaction that it seems like a lot of people viscerally had. And that was, you know, this is kind of cringe, it's goofy looking, it's kind of embarrassing for the sport. That was my initial reaction, especially when it pertains to the pros, because they are a representation of this is the highest level of the sport. This is the highest level of professionalism. We're competing for money. We're competing for the biggest prizes. We're competing for the biggest stages. I mean, these are shows that are qualifiers for the Olympia, which is the most prestigious bodybuilding show in the world. But even though that was my initial reaction, the more I thought about it, I kind of had a secondary reaction that was more like, is this really how boring bodybuilding has become? When you watch these routines, whether it was Sean T or Michelle at the Flex Pro Weekend Italy, it's a lot of dancing, but realistically, we're talking about 20 or 30 seconds of dancing, or maybe even less than that in these routines. And I kind of started thinking about the fact that, you know, bodybuilding finals routines are meant to be entertaining. They're meant to be artistic. You're supposed to be actually hitting poses and not dancing necessarily. It's not like I liked these routines, but I was really thinking, like, has bodybuilding really gotten to that point where if somebody adds a few seconds of dancing into their routine, it's like a giant conversation now that the whole industry is talking about this guy was doing too much. And I kind of started to look at it as, you know, these guys actually took a shot. Maybe they missed. I mean, maybe the execution wasn't great in their finals routine, but they took a shot at doing something creative, and it kind of led to the whole industry critiquing them for it. And it kind of made me think, I mean, has bodybuilding really gotten to that boring of a point where if someone adds a little bit of energy or dancing into their routine, it's like a big controversy because nobody really does that anymore. It feels like nobody really takes a shot. I mean, you had guys like Cedric, Kai Green, they did a really great job of this. You could go back to Marvelous Melvin Anthony, did a great job of incorporating some dance moves into his posing routine, and it was really entertaining. So I feel like these guys, even though their execution wasn't good, and I personally didn't like the routines, I kind of look at it with a little bit of nuance and say, well, they took a shot. They tried something creative. It might not have looked the best, but they tried. And I feel like that's more than you can say for a lot of pros now. I mean, a lot of pros just hit the standard, you know, heavy rock music routine, just hit some poses, and there's nothing super creative about it. And to be fair, it is bodybuilding. You want to see poses. You want to see the physique. You don't want to see a lot of dancing in bodybuilding. I totally get that. But I'm also looking at it from that perspective of at least these guys tried something creative. You don't see that very much in bodybuilding. And it kind of made me lean the other direction and say, you know, is this really that big of a deal? Now, if you actually look at the rules for a bodybuilding routine on the IFBB website, there really is nothing that specifically says you've got to hit X amount of poses in your finals routine. You can't dance for this amount of time. And maybe that's something that changes with what we've been seeing recently, because it feels like in the last month we've seen a lot of dancing in these routines. But really the only things that are listed, and this is specifically for bodybuilding, just to give an example, but you can't use props in the prejudging or in your finals routine. Your music can't have vulgarity or profanity in the music. No excessive application of oils, moisturizers, no bracelets. Like they're kind of limiting adding accessories in your routine. And then 18 might be this section 18 might be the only thing that could be applicable to the dancing if promoters want to crack down on it. There is kind of this provision in the rules that says competitors are prohibited from presenting themselves in any sort of vulgar, obscene, profane, indecent, lewd, lascivious, repugnant, shocking, or offensive manner as determined by the event promoter and one or more of event judges in their sole and absolute discretion. So this one could apply if the IFBB decides to say, okay, we don't want an excessive amount of dancing, even though that's not explicitly in the rules. The way this Section 18 is worded, especially when you look at shocking or offensive, I don't think anything that we saw was like obscene or profane or, sexual, lewd in nature. But if a promoter wanted to say, or the IFBB wanted to say, okay, this many seconds of dancing is too much, it's shocking for a bodybuilding show, or this type of dance move is too much, it's shocking for a bodybuilding show, we can just say we don't want that anymore. But really, there's no specific rule about how much you can or can't dance in a posing routine. And I think it's probably good that there's not, because it's kind of a slippery slope. If you say no dancing, or you put a hard limit on dancing, you're kind of stifling the creativity that could go into a bodybuilding routine. I mean, I get it. We're there for bodybuilding. We don't want to see a lot of dancing. But do you also just want the most minimalist, and some people might, a hardcore bodybuilding fan might want this, but do you really want the most minimalist, limited in creativity routine? Because the routines, I feel like, are already boring enough. I feel like you should give these guys like a certain degree of creative expression in the routines. And maybe some guys miss, like some of these guys that we've seen recently, and a lot of people don't like the dancing. But again, I kind of feel like at least they tried something a little bit out of the box. As long as they still had some poses in there, there was still some bodybuilding aspect to it. I'm not super mad at it. I mean, it did look cringe and goofy, but I'm not really up in arms about, some guys taking a chance and missing a little bit. But this is in reference to the pros. And more recently, one of the reasons why I wanted to make this video, there was an amateur guy that generated a lot of discussion doing this. And this is one thing I really wanted to touch on, because I saw, again, I had the same initial reaction. I was like, okay, this is cringe. This is kind of embarrassing. But it's an amateur masters 50-plus competitor that you're looking at here. And I actually saw Nick Walker had a really interesting take on this, where he kind of said the opposite of what a lot of people were saying. He's like, this guy, he's probably really proud of his physique. You have no idea, what he probably went through or what he's been going through to get to this physique. Again, he's an amateur masters 50-plus competitor. He was probably really proud, really excited to get on stage. And, this is amateur. This is not like experienced stage presence. He could have got nervous and did this. Maybe he had like a real routine planned out, got a little bit nervous, and the execution wasn't great, but tried something high energy and creative, and then everybody shits on him for it. But again, he's an amateur competitor. And that's the piece that I take issue with is, like I said, you can be a little bit more critical of the pros because they represent the pinnacle of professionalism in the sport. But I think there's a reality that a lot of people, it's hard for people to accept with a lot of amateur competitions. We see this across the board. Maybe it's, someone that's overweight stepping on an amateur bodybuilding stage, but to them, maybe they lost 200 pounds and that was the best physique they've ever had in their life. And they wanted to try to step on stage to challenge themselves and to showcase the best physique they've ever had. Or maybe it's somebody with a disability that overcame that and trained through it, and they brought a physique that they wanted to bring to an amateur stage. Or maybe it's somebody that's over 50 and they're in the best shape they've ever been in their life, and they wanted to try an amateur bodybuilding competition. A lot of people take issue with this, but this is a big part of the amateur bodybuilding competition scene. It's a big part of the idea of what it is to be an amateur bodybuilder. Not everybody stepping on these NPC stages has ambitions of turning pro. Not everybody stepping on these NPC stages has ambitions of being Mr. Olympia. For a lot, and maybe even a majority of amateur competitors, they're doing it to challenge themselves, and that's perfectly fine. There's no inherent, like, you have to be competing as an amateur because you want to turn pro. There's no inherent meaning behind you competing as an amateur. If you want to this is just the best shape you've ever been in, even if it doesn't stack up great next to other amateurs, you still have a right to step on that stage and showcase your physique. And that's kind of the whole idea behind amateur bodybuilding. And even if your routine turns out to be a little bit cringe or a little bit goofy, again, it's an amateur bodybuilder showcasing their physique to the best of their ability. And I really actually don't have a problem with that. I think the amateur bodybuilding competitions should be accessible to anybody, and they should feel like anybody, I mean, within reason, anybody can come showcase their physique as long as they follow the rules, no vulgar music or obscene stuff or whatever. But I feel like you can't really expect an amateur competitor to have the best routine. I feel like this is an even better example of somebody taking a shot at a high energy routine. He's excited to be there. Maybe the execution wasn't the best, but did you really expect it to be? It's an amateur guy that got posted on social media and it went viral and people started critiquing him. And this is just kind of the reality of amateur bodybuilding. It's not professionals. And I think that if you really follow bodybuilding closely, of course you like to see the high level, national level shows, the pro qualifying shows. You like to see the highly competitive amateurs. But if you've been following bodybuilding for a long time, you know that a very big portion of amateur bodybuilding is really not even a competition. There's so many shows in so many categories, and probably a lot of you guys have even competed yourself and experienced this, where you show up and you're the only person in your division. You're the only person in your, whether it's your weight, your age, your specific category, and you basically are just getting a trophy for being the only person in your category. And that's a lot of amateur bodybuilding. It's not that serious to where I just feel like we're taking it too serious when it pertains to this guy, when it pertains to amateur bodybuilding. There is the higher level, national level, pro qualifying level amateur bodybuilding, but the vast majority of it is not super serious. And that's just the reality of it. The vast majority of amateur bodybuilding is anybody, everybody step on that stage, and you might even place first. So I'm curious to hear what you guys think about this in the comments below. I'm sure this will be a little bit of a controversial topic, but I'm okay with that. I just think, yeah, maybe you can be more critical of the pros, but I was seeing a lot of like really, really harsh negative comments towards the amateur competitors specifically, and it just made me kind of think about the reality of most amateur bodybuilding shows. It's not that serious. These guys are not experienced. They're not professionals. They haven't practiced the routine 1,000 times. They haven't stepped on stage hundreds of times. Maybe, I mean, I guess he would be a novice if he was, but maybe it was his first time ever doing a routine like this, and he got nervous, and it didn't look that great. I don't think we should take an amateur bodybuilding competition, especially a Masters 50 plus, just because it got filmed on a nice HD camera. It went viral in that 9:16 framing as like a reel. I don't think we should be super critical of guys like this, that it's an amateur that actually tried something. And I think this is one aspect of bodybuilding that I think is controversial. There's always this conversation of, will bodybuilding ever go mainstream? Or how mainstream could bodybuilding go? And I feel like one of the issues with bodybuilding going mainstream, one of the many issues with it, is the amateur ranks and just the vast differences in the levels of amateur competitors. There's some very weird amateur competitions, and it's not like going from high school football to college football to pros. There are guys competing in the NPC that look like they've been training for a week. There have been guys that look like they've been training for decades, and they look like they could be on a pro stage tomorrow. But I think that aspect of the amateurs, even though it might hinder some type of mainstream appeal for bodybuilding, I think that's what makes bodybuilding so cool, and that's what makes the fan base so broad, is because anybody, literally any of you guys watching this right now, if you want to step on an NPC stage next week as a novice amateur bodybuilder, you could do that. It's accessible for anybody to try to compete, and I think that's what makes bodybuilding really cool. And I think when we are overly critical of maybe a not so high level bodybuilder, which is evident from this video, I feel like that makes the bodybuilding community actually look worse than the routine that we're watching, because I feel like that is one of the cooler parts about bodybuilding is any gym rat, if you're into working out, you're a fan of bodybuilding, and you just want to better yourself, you can step on a novice NPC stage literally next week. And I don't think that if you want to do that, you should carry the burden of feeling like you're representing the sport as a whole. That whatever you do on that stage as an amateur competitor, it could embarrass the entire sport of bodybuilding. I don't feel like you should have that burden if you're competing as an amateur. And I feel the same way, like across the board for all the divisions, even if I'm not like personally a big fan of watching men's physique, for example, or watching bikini, or whatever the new women's division was. The flip side of that is what I really like about it is it does make it more accessible for anybody. If you feel like you are an amateur or a novice and you're not big enough yet to step on stage in bodybuilding, you could do men's physique, you could do classic or bodybuilding. You have options. It gives any gym rat the ability to try to start competing, to get your starting point. And I think that's a really important thing for bodybuilding that we shouldn't be overcritical of with the amateurs. Everybody starts somewhere, and especially in this case with the guy that's the Masters guy. Maybe he's 50-plus years old, and this is the first time he's ever stepped on stage. I've never heard of him. I don't know his history. Maybe that's not true, but what if it was? Should we really be that critical of him? We're not critiquing Olympia competitors here. Just something to think about. I feel like I had a little bit of a different take on this than a lot of people had. I feel like people were really angry about a lot of these routines, and I just didn't feel the same way after thinking about it. But let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, click that bell notification icon if you have not already. And as always, I love you guys, appreciate you guys. Nick Strength and Power signing out. All right, guys, don't forget to click that like button and subscribe to this channel if you enjoy the content. Also, check out my Instagram at Nick Strength Power, my Facebook page, which is simply Nick Strength and Power, my secondary YouTube channel, Nick Strength and Vlogs, for vlogs and bonus content that you will not see on this channel. And consider subscribing to my third YouTube channel, Nick Strength and Pokemon, which is all things Pokemon and trading card games, completely unrelated to this channel. So if you're into that, give that one a look. And all links to merchandise and social media will be in the description box below. If you guys want a Nick Strength and Power t-shirt, that will be in the Shopify link below. Have a great day.